morning sun cast long shadows across the Coronado Naval Base shooting range as Danny Martinez walked through the heavy metal doors. The smell of gunpowder and oil filled his nose, a scent he had grown to love during his months of Navy SEAL training. The range was mostly empty at this early hour, with only a few instructors checking equipment and preparing for the day ahead. Danny carried his rifle case to Lane 7, his usual spot during morning practice sessions. He enjoyed the quiet hours before other recruits arrived, when he could focus completely on his shooting without distractions. The silence helped him concentrate on his breathing, his stance, and the precise movements that would one day save his life in combat. As he unpacked his weapon and began setting up his equipment, Danny noticed movement in the corner lane at the far end of the range. An elderly man stood there, methodically loading bullets into a magazine. The stranger looked out of place among the military surroundings. He wore simple blue jeans and a red flannel shirt that had seen better days. His gray hair was cut short but not in military style, and his weathered face spoke of many years under the sun. Danny had been training at this facility for 8 months and had never seen this man before. The shooting range was restricted to military personnel and authorized civilians, so the old man must have proper clearance to be here. Still, something about him seemed different from the usual mix of active duty soldiers and contractors who used the facility. The elderly man moved with surprising grace for someone his age. Danny estimated he was probably in his 70s, maybe older, but his hands were steady and his posture straight. He handled his weapon with the kind of confidence that only came from decades of experience. Every movement was precise and deliberate, like watching a master craftsman at work. Danny tried to focus on his own training, but found himself glancing over at the old man repeatedly. The stranger had finished loading his magazine and was now taking his position at the firing line. He raised his rifle smoothly, took aim, and fired a single shot. The sound echoed through the range, sharp and clean. Through the spotting scope, Danny could see that the bullet had hit dead center of the target at 50 yards. The old man fired again and again, each shot placed with mechanical precision. Danny had seen good shooters before, including some of the best military marksmen in the world, but this level of accuracy was extraordinary. The elderly man continued his practice routine with methodical patience. He would fire 5 shots, then lower his weapon and examine the target through his own scope. He would make tiny adjustments to his equipment, then fire another group. Danny noticed that each group of shots was clustered so tightly that they almost looked like a single large hole in the target. After watching for nearly an hour, Danny realized he had barely touched his own rifle. The old man's shooting performance was mesmerizing. There was something almost mechanical about the way he operated, as if he were a machine designed specifically for accurate shooting. Yet at the same time, his movements had a fluid quality that spoke of natural talent refined by countless hours of practice. The morning sun climbed higher, and other recruits began arriving for their scheduled training sessions. The range started to fill with the sounds of multiple weapons firing, brass cases hitting the concrete floor, and instructors calling out corrections and encouragement. Despite the growing noise and activity, the elderly man remained focused on his own practice, seemingly unaware of everything happening around him. Danny forced himself to concentrate on his own training routine. He had important qualifications coming up, and his performance on the shooting range would be a major factor in whether he advanced to the next phase of SEAL training. He loaded his magazine, took his position, and began firing at his target. His first group was decent but not exceptional. Danny frowned and adjusted his scope, then fired again. Better, but still not up to his usual standards. He realized that watching the old man had actually hurt his own concentration. The stranger's perfect shooting had made Danny second-guess his own technique. During a break to check his target, Danny walked down range to examine his shots. As he passed the old man's lane, he could not help but look at the stranger's target. What he saw made him stop and stare. The target looked like it had been attacked by a drill press. Every shot hole was perfectly round and placed exactly where aimed. Some groups were so tight that multiple bullets had passed through the same hole. On his way back to the firing line, Danny glanced at the old man again. The stranger was reloading his magazine with the same careful precision he brought to everything else. As he worked, he rolled up the sleeves of his flannel shirt to keep them out of the way. That was when Danny saw the tattoo. The marking on the old man's forearm was unlike anything Danny had ever seen. It was not the typical military tattoo with eagles, anchors, or unit insignia. Instead, it appeared to be some kind of geometric pattern made up of intersecting lines and symbols. The design was intricate and seemed to have an almost technological quality to it. What struck Danny most was how the tattoo seemed to catch and reflect light in an unusual way. Under the fluorescent lights of the shooting range, parts of the design appeared to shimmer slightly, as if the ink contained metallic particles or some other special material. The symbols within the pattern were completely unfamiliar, not from any alphabet or writing system Danny recognized. The old man finished reloading and rolled his sleeves back down, covering the strange tattoo. He returned to his shooting position and continued his practice as if nothing had happened. Danny found himself even more curious about this mysterious stranger, who could shoot like a machine and wore tattoos that seemed to glow. For the remainder of his practice session, Danny split his attention between his own training and observing the elderly man. The stranger never spoke to anyone, never took extended breaks, and never seemed to tire. He simply continued his methodical routine of loading, aiming, firing, and examining his results. As other recruits arrived and began their own training, several of them also noticed the old man's extraordinary shooting ability. Danny heard whispered conversations and saw pointing fingers, but the stranger seemed completely oblivious to the attention he was attracting. He remained focused on his practice with single-minded determination. When Danny finished his own session and began packing his equipment, the old man was still shooting. His accuracy had not diminished even slightly after hours of continuous practice. If anything, his group seemed to be getting even tighter as the morning progressed. Danny wanted to approach the stranger and ask about his background, but something held him back. There was an aura of intensity around the old man that suggested he did not welcome interruptions. Danny decided to wait for a better opportunity to satisfy his curiosity about the mysterious shooter and his unusual tattoo. 3 days passed before Danny saw the old man again at the shooting range. This time Danny arrived even earlier, hoping to have a chance to observe the stranger without the distractions of other trainees. The elderly man was already there, setting up his equipment with the same methodical precision Danny had noticed before. Danny chose a lane closer to the old man today, only 2 positions away instead of being across the entire range. He wanted to get a better look at the stranger's technique and perhaps find an opportunity to start a conversation. The morning was quiet except for the distant sounds of early morning training exercises happening elsewhere on the base. The old man began his shooting routine exactly as he had 3 days earlier. Load magazine, take position, fire 5 shots, examine target, make adjustments, repeat. His consistency was remarkable, as if he followed some internal programming that never varied. Danny found himself timing the stranger's routine and discovered that each cycle took exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. As Danny set up his own equipment, he tried to study the old man's shooting stance and grip without being obvious about it. The stranger held his rifle in a way that looked familiar yet somehow different from standard military technique. His left elbow was positioned slightly lower than Danny had been taught, and his breathing pattern seemed to follow a rhythm Danny did not recognize. After completing his first group of shots, Danny decided to take a chance during the natural break, when both men were checking their targets. He cleared his throat and spoke in a respectful but friendly tone. "Excuse me, sir. I am Danny Martinez, Navy SEAL trainee. I could not help but notice your shooting. That is some impressive accuracy you have there." The old man looked up from his spotting scope with pale blue eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience Danny could barely imagine. For a moment, the stranger studied Danny with an intensity that made the young recruit feel like he was being evaluated in ways he did not understand. Then the old man smiled slightly and his expression softened. "Name is Frank Sullivan," he replied in a voice that carried the hint of an accent Danny could not place. "And I appreciate the compliment, son. Though I have to say my service was quite different from what you are training for here." Danny felt encouraged by the friendly response and moved a step closer. "Where did you serve, if you do not mind me asking? I have never seen shooting like that, not even from our best instructors." Frank continued examining his target through the scope as he answered, "Oh, I served in places most people have never heard of. Fought in conflicts that do not appear in any history books you would recognize. Been doing this kind of work for longer than you might believe." There was something in Frank's tone that suggested layers of meaning Danny did not understand. The old man spoke as if he was choosing his words very carefully, revealing just enough to be polite while keeping important details hidden. Danny sensed that Frank Sullivan had stories that would be difficult to believe. "Your technique is really unique," Danny continued, hoping to keep the conversation going. "I have been watching how you position yourself, and it is different from what we learn in training. Where did you pick that up?" Frank lowered his scope and turned to face Danny directly. "Experience teaches you things that manuals cannot, son. When you have been in enough real situations, you learn to adapt your technique to what actually works rather than what theoretically should work." As Frank spoke, he unconsciously rolled up his sleeves again to adjust his grip on the rifle. Danny got another clear look at the strange tattoo on the old man's forearm. In the better light and from closer distance, the marking was even more intriguing than before. The geometric pattern seemed to have multiple layers, with some lines appearing to cross over or under others in ways that created an optical illusion of depth. "That is an interesting tattoo you have there, Mr. Sullivan," Danny said, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. "I have never seen anything like it. What does it represent?" Frank glanced down at his arm as if he had forgotten the tattoo was visible. His expression grew more serious, and Danny noticed a subtle change in the old man's posture. Frank seemed to be weighing whether to answer the question honestly or deflect it somehow. "Most people have not seen anything like it," Frank said slowly, "and most people never will. It represents membership in a very exclusive organization, one that operates outside normal military structures." Danny felt his interest growing even stronger. "Special operations? I know there are units that do not officially exist, black ops groups that handle classified missions. Is that what you were part of?" Frank studied Danny for a long moment, as if trying to decide how much he could safely reveal. "You could say that, though the organization I belong to makes your black ops groups look like neighborhood watch committees. We dealt with threats that required a different kind of response." The way Frank spoke made Danny think the old man was being literal rather than boastful. There was no bravado in his voice, just a matter-of-fact tone that suggested he was simply stating obvious facts. Danny had met enough genuine combat veterans to recognize the difference between someone who had seen real action and someone who was trying to impress people with war stories. "The tattoo itself," Frank continued, "is not just decorative. It serves a practical purpose related to the work we did. Think of it as a kind of identification system, though it operates in ways most people would not understand." Danny looked more closely at the tattoo and noticed something he had missed before. The intricate pattern seemed to contain tiny details that were almost too small to see clearly. Some of the lines appeared to have a texture that was different from regular tattoo ink, and certain sections seemed to reflect light in unusual ways. "It looks almost technological," Danny observed, "like it was made with some kind of special materials or techniques." Frank smiled again, but this time there was something mysterious in his expression. "Very observant, son. You have good eyes for detail. That quality will serve you well in the work you are training for." Before Danny could ask more questions, Frank began packing up his equipment. "I need to wrap up my session for today," he said. "But I have enjoyed talking with you, Danny. You seem like the kind of person who asks good questions and pays attention to important details." As Frank prepared to leave, he paused and looked directly at Danny. "Tell me something, son. Why did you decide to become a SEAL? What drives you to push yourself through this kind of training?" The question caught Danny off guard. He had expected to be the one asking questions, not answering them. "I want to serve my country," he said. "I want to be part of something bigger than myself, to make a difference in protecting people who cannot protect themselves." Frank nodded slowly, as if Danny's answer confirmed something he had been thinking. "Good motivations. The world needs people who are willing to stand up when things get difficult. Just remember that sometimes the biggest threats come from directions you do not expect." With that cryptic statement, Frank finished packing his rifle case and headed toward the exit. Danny watched him go, feeling like their conversation had raised more questions than it had answered. There was clearly much more to Frank Sullivan than appeared on the surface. As Danny returned to his own training, he found it even harder to concentrate than before. His mind kept returning to the strange tattoo and Frank's mysterious comments about exclusive organizations and unexpected threats. The old man had spoken like someone who knew things about the world that were not common knowledge. Danny completed his shooting practice, but his groups were not as tight as usual. His thoughts kept drifting to Frank Sullivan and the puzzle the old man represented. Danny had a feeling that their conversation was just the beginning of something much more significant than a chance meeting at a shooting range. Danny arrived at the shooting range the next morning with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He hoped to see Frank Sullivan again, and perhaps learn more about the mysterious old man and his unusual tattoo. Part of him wondered if he had imagined the strange conversation from the day before, but the memory was too vivid and detailed to be a product of his imagination. Frank was there, occupying the same corner lane as before. This time, however, he seemed to be waiting for something rather than immediately beginning his shooting routine. When Danny entered the range, Frank looked up and nodded in recognition, then gestured for Danny to join him. "Good morning, Danny," Frank said as the young recruit approached. "I was hoping you would show up early again today. I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I believe you deserve some honest answers to the questions you asked." Danny felt a surge of curiosity mixed with apprehension. Something in Frank's tone suggested that whatever he was about to hear would be difficult to believe. "I appreciate that, Mr. Sullivan. I have to admit you have me pretty intrigued about your background and that tattoo." Frank set down his rifle case and turned to face Danny directly. "Before I tell you anything else, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you prepared to hear information that might change how you see the world? Once you know certain things, you cannot go back to not knowing them." The seriousness in Frank's voice made Danny pause. This was clearly not going to be a casual conversation about military service or shooting techniques. "Yes, sir. I think I can handle whatever you want to tell me." Frank studied Danny's face for several seconds as if looking for signs of doubt or uncertainty. Finally, he seemed satisfied with what he saw. "All right then. Let me start with a simple question. Tell me, son, what do you know about the Kepler incident of 23A7? Danny frowned in confusion. "Sir, I am not sure what you mean." "It is 2024 right now. Are you feeling all right?" Frank chuckled softly, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Time gets confusing when you have done what I have done, Danny. You see, the tattoo you have been asking about is not from Earth, and neither am I. Not originally, anyway." Danny felt his military training kick in, telling him to be suspicious of claims that sounded like delusions or mental illness. At the same time, something about Frank's demeanor prevented him from simply dismissing the statement. The old man spoke with calm certainty, not the agitation or confusion Danny would expect from someone experiencing psychological problems. "I do not understand what you are saying, Mr. Sullivan," Danny said carefully. "You are telling me you are not from Earth?" "I am from Earth," Frank clarified. "Just not this Earth and not this time. I was born in the year 2156, Danny. Spent 40 years fighting in what history will call the Proxima Wars before being recruited for temporal operations. I have been living in this time period for the past 15 years, keeping watch and waiting." Danny felt reality shift around him as he tried to process what Frank was saying. Time travel was the stuff of science fiction movies, not real life. Yet Frank spoke about it as matter-of-factly as discussing the weather. "You are saying you are a time traveler?" "Among other things," Frank replied. "The tattoo you have been curious about is called a quantum identifier. It marks me as part of the Temporal Defense Corps, an organization that exists to protect the timeline from threats that have not been born yet in your current era." Frank rolled up his sleeve again, revealing the intricate pattern Danny had studied before. "This is not just ink, son. It is a bio-integrated quantum device that allows me to maintain temporal stability while operating in periods other than my native time. It also serves as identification to others like me who might be working in the same era." Danny stared at the tattoo with new eyes, trying to reconcile what Frank was telling him with everything he thought he knew about reality. "Even if what you are saying is true, why are you telling me this? Why reveal yourself to a SEAL trainee?" Frank's expression grew more serious. "Because something is coming, Danny. Something that will test humanity like nothing we have ever faced before. And Earth is going to need warriors who understand what real war looks like, not just conflicts between human nations." The old man paused, as if gathering his thoughts for a difficult explanation. "In 7 years in 2031, humanity will make first contact with an alien species called the hegemony. What will appear to be a peaceful encounter, a moment of celebration for our species, will actually be the beginning of a very long and very dangerous game." Danny felt his worldview crumbling as Frank continued. The first contact will not be an invasion, Danny. It will be a scouting mission disguised as diplomacy. The hegemony will spend decades studying us, learning our weaknesses, understanding our technology and our psychology. They will present themselves as benevolent allies while secretly preparing for conquest. Why would they wait so long? Danny asked, surprised to find himself engaging with Frank's claims as if they were real. If they are so advanced that they can travel between stars, why not just invade immediately? Frank smiled grimly. Because the hegemony has conquered hundreds of worlds and they have learned that immediate invasion often results in costly resistance movements that can last for centuries. It is much more efficient to study a species thoroughly than strike when they are psychologically unprepared and technologically outmatched. The explanation made a disturbing kind of sense to Danny. If an alien species had the technology for interstellar travel, they would likely have developed sophisticated strategies for conquest as well. So what happens? When do they actually invade? The real invasion begins in 2157, Frank said. By that time, humanity will have become complacent. We will think we are part of some grand galactic community, that we have friends among the stars. We will be wrong. The hegemony will have spent over a century learning everything about us while revealing nothing important about themselves. Frank's voice took on a harder edge. But there is something the hegemony does not understand about humans, something they will learn too late. We do not just fight wars, Danny. We evolve through them. Every conflict makes us stronger, more adaptable, more dangerous. The hegemony expects to find the same soft species they first encountered in 2031. Instead, they will face something they have never seen before. Danny found himself caught between skepticism and fascination. How do you know all this? If you are from the future, why did the invasion succeed enough for you to know about it? Who says it succeeded? Frank replied with a slight smile. The invasion failed, Danny. Humanity won. But the cost was enormous, and the victory took nearly 200 years of the most brutal warfare our species has ever experienced. My mission here is to make sure that when the time comes, humanity is better prepared and the cost is not so high. The implications of what Frank was saying began to sink in. You are here to change history? I am here to guide it, Frank corrected. History is not a fixed thing, son. It is a river that can be diverted if you know where to place the stones. Small changes in the right places can have enormous effects downstream. Frank began packing up his equipment, signaling that their conversation was coming to an end. I have told you this much because you have qualities that will be important in the coming years. Danny, your psychological profile, your physical capabilities, your moral character, all of these mark you as someone who could make a real difference when the time comes. What do you want me to do with this information? Danny asked, still struggling to fully accept what he had heard. For now, nothing, Frank replied. Continue your training, become the best SEAL you can be. But remember what I have told you today. When strange things begin happening in the world, when first contact finally occurs, remember that appearances can be deceiving and that humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to give up when things look impossible. Frank shouldered his rifle case and turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Danny. If you ever see someone else with a tattoo like mine, trust them. We are all working toward the same goal, even if our methods might seem unusual or confusing. As Frank walked away, Danny stood alone in the shooting range, trying to process everything he had just heard. Part of his mind insisted that the old man was delusional, that time travel and alien invasions belonged in movies, not real life. But another part of him, the part trained to assess threats and analyze intelligence, found Frank's explanations disturbingly plausible. Danny realized that whether or not he fully believed Frank's story, something fundamental had changed in how he viewed his training and his future role as a SEAL. The universe suddenly seemed much larger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Danny spent the entire night thinking about his conversation with Frank Sullivan. By morning, he had convinced himself that the old man was either suffering from delusions or playing some kind of elaborate joke. Time travel and alien invasions were simply too far outside the realm of possibility for Danny to accept without concrete evidence. When he arrived at the shooting range the next day, Danny was prepared to politely but firmly ask Frank for proof of his extraordinary claims. He expected the old man to become defensive or angry, which would confirm that the stories were fabrications. Instead, Frank seemed to be waiting for exactly that conversation. "Good morning, Danny," Frank said as soon as the young recruit entered the range. "I can see from your expression that you spent the night thinking about what I told you yesterday. I imagine you have some doubts about the truth of my claims." Danny nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed but determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. "I have to be honest, Mr. Sullivan. Everything you told me sounds impossible. I mean, time travel? Alien invasions? It all sounds like science fiction." Frank smiled, understanding. "Of course it does. If someone had told me the same things when I was your age, I would have reacted exactly the same way. The human mind naturally rejects information that conflicts with established reality. It is a survival mechanism that usually serves us well." The old man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what appeared to be an ordinary smartphone. But sometimes survival requires us to expand our definition of what is possible. "Would you like to see some evidence, Danny?" Danny felt a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Sure, but I am not sure what you could show me on a phone that would prove time travel." Frank held up the device so Danny could see it clearly. "This looks like a standard smartphone to you, does it not? Same size, same basic shape as the devices everyone carries around today." "Yes, it looks completely normal," Danny agreed. Frank tapped the screen a few times, and suddenly the device projected a three-dimensional holographic display that hung in the air between them. Danny stepped back in shock, his training immediately making him scan the area to see if anyone else was witnessing this impossible technology. The hologram showed what appeared to be star charts, with complex mathematical equations scrolling along the sides. The display was crystal clear and completely solid-looking, nothing like the fuzzy, translucent holograms Danny had seen in movies. This looked as real and detailed as watching an actual physical object. "Holographic projection technology will not be commercially available on Earth for another 15 years, Frank explained calmly. "The military will have basic versions in about 8 years, but nothing approaching this level of clarity and detail." Danny reached out tentatively toward the hologram, expecting his hand to pass through empty air. Instead, his fingers encountered a solid surface that felt warm and slightly textured. The projected star chart was not just visual, it had physical substance. "How is this possible?" Danny whispered, afraid to speak loudly and draw attention from anyone who might enter the range. "Quantum manipulation of photons and force fields," Frank replied as if discussing simple mechanics. "The technology is based on principles your current science will not discover for decades. But this is just the beginning of what I can show you." Frank manipulated the holographic controls, and the star chart was replaced by what looked like a historical documentary. Danny saw images of massive space battles with ships larger than aircraft carriers exchanging energy weapons that lit up the darkness between stars. The level of detail was extraordinary, far beyond anything current computer graphics could produce. "These are recordings from the Proxima Wars," Frank explained. "The conflict I told you about yesterday, the one I fought in for 40 years before joining the Temporal Defense Corps. The images shifted to show soldiers in advanced armor fighting alongside creatures that were clearly not human. Some of the aliens were tall and insectoid, while others appeared to be made of living crystal. Danny watched in fascination as human forces coordinated attacks with these strange allies against an enemy that seemed to be a mixture of organic and mechanical components. "Wait," Danny said, pointing at one of the armored figures in the display. "That soldier there, the one leading the assault on that fortress. That looks like you," Frank nodded. "That is me about 30 years ago subjective time. I was a lieutenant colonel in the Terran Defense Force, commanding the 3rd Assault Battalion. We were fighting on a moon called Kepler-7, trying to retake a hegemony supply depot." Danny studied the younger Frank in the hologram more carefully. The man was clearly the same person, just decades younger and wearing some kind of powered exoskeleton that enhanced his physical capabilities. The resemblance was unmistakable, from the facial structure to the way he moved and gestured. "This could still be sophisticated computer graphics," Danny said, though he was beginning to doubt his own skepticism. "Hollywood can create pretty convincing fake footage these days." Frank manipulated the controls again, and the hologram zoomed in on the younger Frank's face. "Computer graphics require source material to work from, Danny. This footage was recorded long before I came to this time period. There would be no way for anyone in 2024 to have images of me as a younger man, wearing technology that does not exist yet." The logic was difficult to argue with. Danny found himself running out of rational explanations for what he was seeing. "Even if this is real, How do I know you are not just showing me scenes from some other planet, some other species that looks like humans? Frank smiled and made another adjustment to the hologram. The scene shifted to show a detailed view of the planet where the battle was taking place. In the distance, clearly visible in the alien sky, was a familiar blue and green world with a single large moon. That is Earth. Danny is seen from Kepler-7 in the year 2187. The battle you just watched was fought to protect your homeworld from an enemy that wanted to mine it for resources after eliminating the human population. Danny stared at the image of Earth hanging in an alien sky, trying to process the implications of what Frank was showing him. You are saying this battle was fought to save Earth? To save us? Among other things, Frank replied. The Proxima Wars were ultimately about survival, both for humanity and for several other species the hegemony had targeted for elimination. It took us nearly 2 centuries to build the alliances and develop the technology needed to defeat them. Frank closed the hologram and returned the device to his pocket. But that is a timeline we want to improve upon, Danny. The cost was too high, and too many good people died because humanity was not prepared when the threat first appeared. Danny felt overwhelmed by everything he had just witnessed. The evidence was too detailed and consistent to be dismissed as a hoax. Yet accepting it meant fundamentally changing his understanding of reality. If all of this is true, why are you showing it to me? What do you want from me? I want you to be ready, Frank said simply. In the original timeline, you died in 2029 during what should have been a routine training exercise. But your death created what we call a cascade failure, a series of events that weakened Earth's defenses when we could least afford it. The revelation hit Danny like a physical blow. I die in 5 years? You died in 5 years, Frank corrected. Past tense. That timeline no longer exists because I am here to prevent it. But preventing your death is just the first step. I also need to ensure that you become the leader you were meant to be. Frank reached into another pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a simple metal bracelet. This will help protect you from the temporal distortions that are coming as we make changes to the timeline. It will also begin preparing your body for modifications that will not be invented for another century. Danny took the bracelet hesitantly. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly with some kind of internal energy. What kind of modifications? Enhanced reflexes, improved cognitive processing, increased physical resilience, Frank explained. Nothing that will make you superhuman by future standards, but improvements that will give you significant advantages by current measures. The changes will be gradual and will feel natural as they occur. Danny slipped the bracelet onto his wrist. Immediately, he felt a tingling sensation that spread up his arm and throughout his body. His vision seemed to become slightly sharper, and he felt more alert and focused than he had moments before. The process has begun, Frank said with satisfaction. Over the next few months, you will notice improvements in your physical and mental performance. Your training scores will improve, your reaction times will decrease, and your ability to process complex information will increase significantly. Danny looked down at the bracelet, which now seemed to have bonded seamlessly with his skin. What happens if people notice these changes? How do I explain suddenly becoming better at everything? You do not need to explain anything, Frank replied. Gradual improvement is expected in elite military training. Your instructors will assume you are simply reaching your potential through hard work and dedication. By the time anyone might become suspicious, you will have been selected for assignments where such capabilities are considered necessary rather than unusual. Frank began gathering his equipment again, preparing to leave. I have given 2 weeks passed before Danny saw Frank again, though the effects of the strange bracelet became more apparent every day. His shooting scores improved dramatically, his physical fitness tests showed results that surprised even his instructors, and his ability to process tactical information during training, exercises had increased to levels that bordered on exceptional. Danny found himself thinking more clearly and reacting faster to unexpected situations. During a particularly challenging night navigation exercise, he completed the course in record time while making 0 errors. His drill instructors were impressed but not suspicious. Elite military training was designed to push people beyond their normal limits. When Frank finally appeared at the shooting range again, Danny was ready with dozens of questions that had been building up since their last conversation. The old man seemed to sense Danny's eagerness and gestured for him to come over immediately. "Good morning, Danny," Frank said with a smile. "I can see the modifications are taking hold nicely. Your performance reports have been quite impressive lately. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. You have been monitoring my training records? I have access to information systems you cannot imagine, Frank replied calmly. Keeping track of your progress is necessary to ensure the timeline adjustments are proceeding correctly. So far, everything is developing exactly as we hoped. Frank set up his equipment with the same methodical precision as always, but today he seemed more focused on conversation than shooting practice. I think it is time to give you more details about what humanity will be facing. Danny, you need to understand the true scope of the threat if you are going to help prepare for it. Danny moved closer, eager to learn more about the future Frank had described. Tell me about this hegemony. What are they like? What do they want? Frank's expression grew darker. The hegemony is not a single species, Danny. It is a collective of dozens of different alien races that have been conquered and absorbed over thousands of years. Think of it as a galactic empire built on the systematic elimination of independent civilizations. The old soldier paused to organize his thoughts. Their strategy is always the same. First contact appears peaceful and beneficial. They share some basic technology, establish diplomatic relations, and present themselves as benevolent guides who want to help younger species develop and prosper. That does not sound so bad, Danny said, though he sensed there was much more to the story. It is not, Frank agreed. For the first few decades, humanity will genuinely benefit from contact with the hegemony. They will share medical technology that eliminates most diseases, energy systems that solve climate change, and manufacturing techniques that end scarcity for basic necessities. Frank began loading his rifle as he continued. The problem is that during this honeymoon period, the hegemony will be conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in human history. Every piece of technology they share will contain monitoring systems. Every cultural exchange will involve psychological profiling. Every diplomatic meeting will gather data about human decision-making processes. Danny felt his enhanced cognitive abilities working to process the implications of what Frank was describing. They are not just studying our technology. They are studying us. Exactly, Frank confirmed. By the time the real invasion begins, the hegemony will know more about human psychology, sociology, and military capabilities than humans know about themselves. They will understand our weaknesses, our fears, our motivations, and our likely responses to various types of pressure. Frank raised his rifle and fired a perfect shot before continuing. But there is something else, something that makes the hegemony particularly dangerous. They do not just conquer species, they absorb them. Conquered populations become part of the hegemony collective, their technology and knowledge integrated into the empire's growing capabilities. What does that mean for humanity? Danny asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. It means that if the invasion succeeds, humans will not be exterminated, Frank explained grimly. We will be converted. Our children will be raised as hegemony citizens, taught to see conquest and absorption as natural and beneficial. Within a few generations, humanity as an independent species will cease to exist. Danny felt his blood run cold as he imagined human children being raised to participate in the conquest of other worlds. How do they convert entire populations like that? Frank fired another shot before answering. Combination of technology and psychology. They have developed sophisticated methods for altering brain chemistry and neural pathways. Not quite mind control, but close enough. Combined with careful education and cultural manipulation, they can reshape an entire species within 50 years. The shooting range suddenly felt much colder to Danny, despite the warm morning sun streaming through the windows. In your timeline, how long did it take for them to succeed? How long did humanity resist? The initial invasion lasted 30 years, Frank replied. But humanity never fully surrendered. There were always resistance movements, hidden colonies, groups that refused to be absorbed. The total conflict spanned nearly 2 centuries before we finally developed the capability to strike back effectively. Frank paused his shooting and turned to face Danny directly. The turning point came when we realized that the hegemony's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their strategy of absorption meant they had accumulated the knowledge and technology of hundreds of conquered species. But it also meant they had become dependent on maintaining control over all those different populations. So how did humanity win? Danny asked. We learned to turn their own absorbed species against them, Frank explained. It took us over a century to make contact with resistance movements among other conquered populations. But once we did, We discovered that the hegemony was not as unified as they appeared. Many absorbed species had been waiting for an opportunity to rebel. Frank smiled grimly. Humans became the catalyst for the largest slave revolt in galactic history. Species that had been part of the hegemony for thousands of years suddenly remembered what independence felt like. The empire collapsed from within as much as from external pressure. Danny tried to imagine the scope of such a conflict. Dozens of alien species across hundreds of worlds all fighting for freedom simultaneously. How many species were involved in the rebellion? 47 different intelligent species participated in the final revolt, Frank said. But the cost was enormous. Billions died on both sides. Entire star systems were rendered uninhabitable, and some species were driven to extinction during the fighting. By the time it was over, the galaxy was in ruins. Frank resumed his shooting practice, placing each shot with mechanical precision as he continued the story. That is why I am here, Danny. That is why the Temporal Defense Corps exists. We have the opportunity to change history, to make humanity ready for what is coming so the cost will not be so high. What can we do differently? Danny asked. How do we prepare for something like this? Several things, Frank replied. First, we accelerate human technological development in key areas. Military technology, obviously, but also space travel, communications, and manufacturing. We need to close the gap between human and hegemony capabilities as much as possible before first contact. Frank fired another perfect shot. Second, we prepare selected individuals like yourself to be leaders when the crisis comes. Enhanced humans who can think faster, react quicker, and inspire others to fight when surrender seems logical. And third, Danny prompted. Third, we establish secret alliances with other species before the hegemony makes contact, Frank said. There are races out there who escaped hegemony absorption and have been hiding for centuries. If we can find them and build relationships before 2031, we will not be facing the invasion alone. Danny felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This is all going to depend on people like me, is it not? People you have enhanced and trained for leadership roles. Frank nodded seriously. Partially, yes. But remember, Danny, you are not alone in this. There are others like you being prepared around the world. When the time comes, you will be part of a network of enhanced individuals working together to coordinate humanity's response. The old soldier finished his magazine and began reloading. For now, your job is to continue excelling in your training and to gradually build a reputation as an exceptional operator. You will be selected for increasingly important assignments, and each success will position you for greater responsibilities. Frank paused and looked directly at Danny. But there is something else you need to understand. The modifications you are receiving are not just making you better at current human activities. They are preparing your body and mind for technologies and situations that do not exist yet in your time. What do you mean? Danny asked. In 15 years, you will need to interface directly with alien technology, Frank explained. You will need to think in ways that normal human brains cannot process, react to threats that move faster than current human reflexes can handle, and make tactical decisions based on information streams that would overwhelm unenhanced minds. Frank stood up and began packing his equipment. The person you are becoming. 3 months had passed since Danny first encountered Frank Sullivan at the shooting range. The changes in Danny's abilities had become impossible to ignore, though his instructors attributed his exceptional performance to natural talent combined with intense dedication. Danny had completed advanced training courses in record time and was being considered for specialized assignments typically reserved for operators. With years more experience, Frank appeared at the range on a Tuesday morning, but this time he was not alone. Danny noticed 2 other people setting up equipment in nearby lanes. A woman who appeared to be in her 30s with short dark hair and intense green eyes, and a younger man who looked to be about Danny's age but carried himself with the confidence of someone much older. Danny, Frank called out as soon as he spotted the recruit, I would like you to meet some colleagues of mine. This is Colonel Kate Harrison and Lieutenant Alex Chen. They are both part of the same organization I work for. Danny approached the group cautiously, noting that both newcomers had the same alert, calculating look he had learned to recognize in Frank. When Kate rolled up her sleeves to adjust her rifle grip, Danny saw that she too bore one of the strange quantum tattoos, though hers was located on her left wrist rather than her forearm. Pleased to meet you, Danny, Kate said with a firm handshake. Frank has told us quite a bit about your progress. Your enhancement integration is proceeding faster than we expected. Alex Chen studied Danny with undisguised curiosity. I was enhanced when I was about your age, he said. The process was not nearly as smooth as what you are experiencing. The technology has improved significantly since my time. Danny looked back and forth between the three time travelers, trying to process the fact that he was now meeting an entire team of people from the future. How many of you are there? How many people like Frank are operating in this time period? More than you might expect, fewer than we would like, Kate replied cryptically. The Temporal Defense Corps has teams working in various time periods, but the early 21st century is particularly important for obvious reasons. Frank gestured for Danny to join them at a table set up away from the shooting lanes. We asked Kate and Alex to join us today because it is time to discuss your specific mission. Danny, you have progressed far enough in your enhancement that we can begin preparing you for your actual role in the coming conflict. Danny felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as he sat down with the three-time travelers. What exactly do you want me to do? Kate opened a briefcase and removed what appeared to be a standard military tablet computer. However, when she activated it, the screen displayed information that was clearly far beyond current technology. Your primary mission has 3 phases. Danny, each one builds on the previous phases and becomes progressively more critical to the overall timeline adjustment. The tablet showed a complex flowchart with dates, names, and locations that meant nothing to Danny. Phase 1 begins immediately and continues until first contact in 2031, Kate explained. Your job during this period is to establish yourself as an exceptional operator and gradually move into positions of increasing authority within the military special operations community. Alex leaned forward to point at specific sections of the display. You will be selected for missions that appear routine, but are actually crucial for positioning key resources and eliminating future threats. We have identified 17 specific operations between now and 2031 where your participation will significantly improve outcomes. Danny studied the information on the screen, noting that many of the mission details were still classified above his current clearance level. Some of these operations involve targets I have never heard of. How do you know about missions that have not been planned yet? We know because we lived through this time period once before, Frank replied. In the original timeline, these missions either failed or succeeded, but with much higher costs. Your enhanced capabilities will allow for better outcomes with fewer casualties. Kate manipulated the tablet display to show the second phase of Danny's mission. Phase 2 begins with first contact and continues until the revelation of hegemony true intentions, which occurs in 2089. During this period, your role becomes much more complex and dangerous. The screen showed what appeared to be diplomatic facilities and research installations around the world. You will be part of the human delegation that establishes ongoing contact with the hegemony, Kate explained. But your real mission will be to gather intelligence about their true capabilities and intentions while appearing to be a loyal participant in the contact process. Alex pointed to several highlighted locations on the map. The hegemony will establish embassy facilities in 12 major cities worldwide. Each facility will contain technology and personnel that represent both opportunities for intelligence gathering and significant security threats. You will help coordinate human efforts to understand what we are really dealing with. Danny felt the magnitude of the responsibility beginning to sink in. You are asking me to be a spy among aliens who are far more advanced than humans. How am I supposed to do that without being detected? The enhancements you are receiving include capabilities specifically designed for that purpose, Frank explained. Your brain is being modified to think in patterns that hegemony scanning technology cannot easily read. You will also have access to equipment that does not exist yet in your current time frame. Kate switched the display to show Phase 3 of the mission. Phase 3 begins when the hegemony reveals their true intentions and continues until either successful resistance or total human defeat. This is when your role becomes most critical. The screen showed massive military installations and troop formations that dwarfed anything in current human military organization. You will command enhanced human forces in the initial resistance operations, Kate said. Your job will be to buy time for the larger resistance network to organize while preventing the hegemony from achieving quick, decisive victories. Alex's expression grew serious. In the original timeline, The early resistance efforts were poorly coordinated and suffered catastrophic losses. Entire enhanced human units were eliminated before they could contribute meaningfully to the defense effort. Your leadership will be crucial for keeping those units intact and effective. Danny looked at the 3 time travelers, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they were asking him to do. This all assumes that I survive long enough to reach these later phases. You mentioned that in the original timeline I died in 2029. What exactly happens?
How do I die?
Frank and Kate exchanged glances before Frank answered. Training accident during an underwater demolition exercise. Equipment malfunction leads to unconsciousness underwater, and by the time rescue arrives, it is too late. The accident occurs because of a design flaw in oxygen recycling equipment that will not be discovered until 2030, Alex added. In the original timeline, your death becomes one of the data points that leads to identifying and fixing the flaw. Kate leaned forward with intensity. But we cannot afford to lose you, Danny. Your enhanced physiology should allow you to survive the equipment failure, but only if you are prepared for it when it happens. Frank pulled out another small device from his pocket. This is the emergency beacon that will activate automatically if your life signs drop below critical levels. It will summon rescue teams equipped with advanced medical technology that officially does not exist yet. Danny took the device, which was small enough to conceal easily, but felt surprisingly heavy for its size. How many other people are you doing this for? How many enhanced humans are you creating? Fewer than we would like, Kate admitted. The enhancement process requires very specific genetic and psychological profiles. We have identified approximately 200 individuals worldwide who are suitable candidates for the full enhancement package. Alex smiled grimly. 200 enhanced humans against a galactic empire. It sounds impossible, but you have to remember that we are not fighting this war alone. We have allies you have not met yet and technology you cannot imagine. Frank began packing up the equipment on the table. For now, Danny, continue your training and trust the process. The enhancements will continue developing your capabilities, and we will provide additional equipment and information as you need it. Kate handed Danny a secure communication device that looked like an ordinary fitness tracker. This will allow you to contact us if you encounter situations that require guidance or assistance. It also receives mission updates and intelligence briefings relevant to your current assignments. As the 3 time travelers prepared to leave, Danny felt the weight of his new responsibilities settling on his shoulders. One more question, he said. In your timeline, in the future you come from, do we win? Does humanity really defeat the hegemony? Frank paused at the entrance to the range and smiled. We more than defeat them, Danny. We liberate half the galaxy and establish humanity as one of the major powers in galactic politics. But that victory comes at a cost we hope to avoid this time around, Kate added. Remember, the future is not fixed. Every choice you make, every mission you complete, every life you save changes the outcome. The timeline we come from is just one possibility. Together we are going. 6 months had passed since Danny's last meeting with the time travelers. His enhancement process had continued developing his capabilities in ways that still amazed him daily. His reflexes had become so fast that he sometimes had to consciously slow down his responses to avoid drawing unwanted attention from his instructors. His cognitive processing had improved to the point where he could analyze complex tactical situations in seconds that would normally require minutes of careful study. Danny had successfully completed his basic SEAL training and was now part of an elite unit specializing in underwater demolitions and covert insertions. His performance had been so exceptional that he was being considered for assignments typically reserved for operators with years more experience. The enhancement technology was working exactly as Frank had promised. On a cold December morning, Danny found himself preparing for what should have been a routine underwater training exercise in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California. The mission involved placing simulated explosive charges on the hull of a decommissioned submarine while operating at a depth of 60 feet. It was the kind of exercise Danny had completed dozens of times before, though never with the enhanced capabilities he now possessed. The training team consisted of 6 operators, each carrying standard underwater breathing apparatus and tools for the demolition simulation. Danny had been assigned to lead the exercise, a responsibility that reflected his instructor's confidence in his abilities despite his relatively short time in the unit. As Danny checked his equipment one final time before entering the water, he noticed something unusual about his oxygen recycling unit. The system monitoring display showed parameters that seemed slightly different from normal, though still within acceptable ranges. His enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to process the data more thoroughly than he would have been able to before his modifications. The discrepancy was subtle, a minor variation in oxygen concentration that would normally be dismissed as typical equipment variants. But Danny's enhanced pattern recognition capabilities identified it as potentially problematic. The recycling system was operating at the edge of its design specifications, which could lead to failure under stress. Danny considered reporting the issue to his instructors, but the parameters were technically within normal ranges. Reporting equipment problems without clear justification could be seen as hesitation or excessive caution, qualities that were not valued in elite special operations units. Danny decided to proceed with the exercise while monitoring his equipment more carefully than usual. The team entered the water and began their descent toward the target submarine. The Pacific Ocean was cold and dark even at 60 feet, with visibility limited to about 20 feet despite their underwater lights. Danny felt the familiar sense of calm that came with underwater operations, his enhanced physiology allowing him to remain completely relaxed despite the challenging environment. As the team approached the submarine, Danny positioned his operators for maximum efficiency while maintaining proper safety protocols. His enhanced tactical thinking allowed him to visualize the entire operation from multiple perspectives simultaneously, identifying potential problems before they occurred. The exercise was proceeding smoothly when Danny's oxygen recycling system began displaying warning indicators. The malfunction developed exactly as Frank had predicted it would. A design flaw in the recycling unit caused a cascade failure that would have been fatal to an unenhanced human. Danny felt his oxygen supply becoming contaminated with carbon dioxide at levels that should have caused immediate unconsciousness. His enhanced physiology allowed him to remain conscious and functional far longer than should have been possible. Instead of panicking, Danny's enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to analyze the situation with crystal clarity. He had perhaps 2 minutes before even his enhanced physiology would succumb to the equipment failure. The surface was 60 feet above him, too far to reach with a single breath even with his improved lung capacity. His backup emergency breathing system had also been compromised by the same design flaw, affecting his primary unit. Danny activated the emergency beacon Frank had given him months earlier, hoping the time travelers had been telling the truth about advanced rescue capabilities. At the same time, he began implementing emergency procedures using techniques that seemed to come from knowledge he did not remember learning. His enhanced training was providing him with solutions that went beyond standard military protocols. Rather than attempting to surface immediately, Danny used his enhanced physical capabilities to complete the exercise mission while managing his compromised breathing equipment. His enhanced cognitive processing allowed him to calculate exactly how long he could continue operating while gradually working his way toward the surface. The combination of modified physiology and advanced tactical thinking turned what should have been a fatal equipment failure into a manageable emergency situation. Danny's team members noticed his distress signals and immediately moved to assist, but their standard emergency procedures were not adequate for the type of equipment failure Danny was experiencing. His enhanced abilities allowed him to coordinate their rescue efforts more effectively than normal protocols would permit, turning the exercise team into an efficient emergency response unit. As Danny reached a depth of 30 feet, still managing his breathing emergency through sheer determination and enhanced capabilities, he saw something that should not have been possible. A submarine that had not been there during the initial descent was now positioned directly below the exercise area. The vessel was unlike any military submarine Danny had ever seen, with a sleek design that seemed more advanced than current technology. Divers emerged from the mysterious submarine carrying equipment that looked like medical gear crossed with science fiction. They moved with purpose and efficiency that suggested they had been monitoring the exercise and were prepared for exactly this type of emergency. Danny realized that Frank's emergency beacon had summoned a rescue team from the future. The advanced medical team reached Danny just as his enhanced physiology was beginning to succumb to the equipment failure. They attached breathing apparatus that provided immediate relief, while simultaneously connecting monitoring devices that began analyzing his condition with technology far beyond current medical capabilities. Danny felt his consciousness stabilizing as the advanced equipment took over life support functions. During the rescue operation, Danny noticed that his team members seemed to be moving in slow motion, as if they were experiencing some kind of temporal distortion. The future rescue team worked around the present-day operators without seeming to interact with them directly. Danny realized that the time travelers had technology that allowed them to operate in the same physical space as current time individuals without being detected. The advanced medical team stabilized Danny's condition and began guiding him toward the mysterious submarine. As they moved through the water, Danny saw that the vessel contained medical facilities that looked more like something from a hospital than military equipment. The technology was clearly decades ahead of anything available in 2024. Once inside the submarine, Danny was connected to medical systems that began reversing the effects of the equipment failure while simultaneously monitoring his enhanced physiology. The medical team worked with precision and efficiency that suggested they had extensive experience treating enhanced humans in emergency situations. Frank appeared in the medical bay as Danny was recovering, his expression showing both relief and satisfaction. "The enhancement process worked exactly as designed," he said with a smile. "Your modified physiology bought you the time needed for rescue, and your enhanced cognitive abilities allowed you to manage the emergency more effectively than we had hoped." Danny looked around the advanced medical facility with amazement. "This submarine, this medical equipment, how long have you been operating in our time period?" "Longer than you might expect," Frank replied. "The Temporal Defense Corps maintains permanent installations in several time periods, including your own. This facility has been monitoring your progress and prepared to intervene if necessary." Medical technician who appeared to be human, but had subtle differences that suggested genetic modification approached with a status report. "Full recovery achieved," she announced. "Enhanced physiology integration remains stable, and cognitive enhancement parameters have actually improved as a result of the stress test." Frank nodded with satisfaction. "Emergency situations often accelerate the enhancement process. Your capabilities should be noticeably improved over the next few weeks as your system adapts to what just happened." Danny sat up on the medical table, feeling better than he had in months despite having nearly died from equipment failure. "What happens now?" "How do you explain my survival to my instructors and team members?" "They will find you unconscious but breathing on the surface," Frank explained. "Standard rescue procedures will be followed, and the equipment failure will be attributed to the design flaw we wanted to identify. Your survival will be seen as fortunate rather than impossible." Frank handed Danny a new communication device to replace the emergency beacon. "Your next phase of training begins now, Danny. You have proven that the enhancement process 5 years had passed since the underwater training incident that should have claimed Danny's life. The equipment failure had indeed led to the discovery of the design flaw Frank had mentioned, potentially saving dozens of other operators from similar accidents. Danny had recovered completely and continued his military career with distinction, though he never forgot the advanced rescue operation that had saved him. Danny was now a senior operator in an elite special forces unit that officially did not exist in any military organizational charts. His exceptional performance had led to selection for the most classified missions, involving threats and situations that required capabilities beyond normal human limitations. The enhancement process had continued developing his abilities to levels that sometimes surprised even Danny himself. On a quiet morning in November 2029, Danny found himself back at the Coronado shooting range where he had first encountered Frank Sullivan. He had not seen any of the time travelers for over a year, though he knew they were still monitoring his progress through the communication devices they had provided. Danny suspected this meeting had been planned well in advance. Frank appeared at his usual corner lane, looking exactly as he had 5 years earlier. Time travel apparently had benefits beyond just changing historical outcomes. "Good morning, Danny," the old soldier said with a familiar smile. "I trust you have been making good use of the capabilities we have provided." Danny approached Frank with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "The enhancements have exceeded every expectation you set," he replied. "I can do things now that should be impossible for any human." but I get the feeling that this is just the beginning. Frank nodded as he set up his equipment with the same methodical precision Danny remembered. The foundation work is complete, Danny. Your physiology, cognitive abilities, and tactical skills have been developed to the point where you can handle the next phase of preparation. Today I am here to discuss your transition to active leadership within the Enhanced Human Network. Danny felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. What kind of leadership role are you talking about? Command authority over enhanced human operations in the Western United States, Frank replied matter-of-factly. You will be responsible for coordinating the activities of 37 other enhanced individuals, managing relationships with selected military and intelligence organizations, and preparing for first contact operations beginning in 2031. The scope of responsibility was larger than Danny had expected. 37 others? How many enhanced humans are operational now? Frank smiled grimly. Worldwide, we have successfully enhanced 163 individuals. Not as many as we had hoped, but enough to provide effective leadership when the crisis begins. Each enhanced human will eventually command normal human units ranging from small teams to entire divisions. Frank began his shooting routine, placing each shot with the mechanical precision that had first captured Danny's attention years earlier. The network operates through compartmentalized cells to prevent complete compromise if the hegemony discovers our preparations. You will have direct contact with enhanced leaders in adjacent regions, but limited knowledge of operations outside your area of responsibility. Danny watched Frank's shooting technique, noting details he had missed when his own abilities were less developed. How do we coordinate large-scale operations if we are compartmentalized? Through a combination of advanced communication technology and enhanced human intuition, Frank explained. The modifications you have received include improvements to pattern recognition and strategic thinking that allow enhanced individuals to anticipate each other's actions with remarkable accuracy. Frank fired his last shot and lowered his rifle. There is something else, Danny. Something I have not told you about the enhancement process. The modifications you have received are not just temporary improvements. They are permanent changes that will be passed on to your children. The revelation hit Danny like a physical blow. You are saying the enhancements are genetic? That they affect future generations? Humanity needs to evolve, Danny, Frank said seriously. The threats we will face require capabilities that normal human genetics cannot provide. Enhanced humans like you are the beginning of that evolutionary process. Your children will be born with abilities that exceed even your current capabilities. Frank pulled out a tablet device and showed Danny genetic data that meant little to him, but clearly represented significant scientific achievement. Within 3 generations, enhanced human genetics will become the new baseline for our species. The children and grandchildren of enhanced humans will have capabilities that make current enhancement technology seem primitive. Danny studied the genetic information, trying to understand the implications of what Frank was telling him. You are talking about changing humanity at a fundamental level. What gives us the right to make that choice for the entire species? Survival gives us that right, Frank replied firmly. In the original timeline, normal human genetics proved inadequate for the challenges we faced. The hegemony was simply too advanced, too powerful, and too sophisticated for baseline humanity to resist effectively. Frank switched the display to show population statistics and survival rates. Enhanced humans in the original timeline had survival rates nearly 4 times higher than normal humans during the invasion period. More importantly, enhanced human children showed resistance to hegemony conversion techniques that proved completely effective against normal human psychology. The implications were staggering. You are saying that without enhancement, human children can be converted to serve the hegemony. Not just converted, Danny, completely reprogrammed. Normal human neural development is vulnerable to the techniques the hegemony has perfected over thousands of years. Enhanced human children have cognitive structures that resist those techniques. Frank closed the tablet and returned it to his pocket. Which brings us to your most important mission. In 18 months, you will meet a woman named Dr. Lisa Wong, a geneticist working on classified military medical research. She has been selected for enhancement, but her role in the network will be different from yours. Danny felt his enhanced intuition beginning to process implications he had not consciously considered. Different how? Lisa will become the mother of the first generation of naturally enhanced human children, Frank explained. Her genetic profile, combined with your enhanced genetics, will produce offspring with capabilities that exceed what current enhancement technology can achieve. The personal nature of the mission caught Danny completely off guard. "You are talking about my personal life, my family. You want me to marry this woman?" Frank's expression softened slightly. "I am not giving you orders about your personal relationships, Danny. I am providing information about opportunities that will benefit both you individually and humanity as a whole. The choice of whether to pursue a relationship with Lisa will be entirely yours." Frank began packing his equipment, signaling that their conversation was nearing its end. "What I will tell you is that in the original timeline, you and Lisa met, fell in love, and had 3 children together. Their capabilities helped turn the tide of the war against the hegemony. Creating that timeline again, but with better preparation, could save millions of lives." Danny felt the weight of responsibility for the future of humanity settling on his shoulders once again. What happens to the normal humans? The ones who are not enhanced? Do they just become obsolete? "Enhanced humans will protect normal humans, Danny," Frank assured him. "The goal is not to replace baseline humanity, but to ensure that humanity in all its forms survives and prospers. Enhanced humans will serve as guardians and leaders, while normal humans continue to contribute their own unique strengths to our species." Frank shouldered his rifle case and prepared to leave. "Your next assignment will come through normal military channels within 2 weeks. You will be transferred to a joint military-civilian research facility, where you will meet Lisa, and begin working on projects that will prepare Earth for first contact." As Frank walked toward the exit, he paused and looked back at Danny. "One final thing to remember, son. The enhancement process has changed you in ways beyond just physical and mental capabilities. You have become something new, something that has never existed before in human history. Trust your instincts because they are no longer entirely human instincts." Danny watched Frank leave, knowing somehow that this would be their last meeting in the current time period. The old soldier had given him everything he needed to fulfill his role in the coming crisis. Now it was up to Danny to prove worthy of the trust and responsibility that had been placed in him. Looking down at his arm, Danny noticed something that had not been there that morning. A faint outline of a geometric pattern was beginning to appear on his forearm, in the same location where Frank wore his quantum identifier tattoo. The enhancement process was nearing completion, and Danny Martinez was becoming something beyond normal human limitations. As Danny left the shooting range for the last time as an enhanced human in training, he carried with him the knowledge that humanity's future depended on the choices he would make in the coming years.